sa Bola Majekobaje. Hello, my name is Bola Majekobaje, and I wanted to thank the organizers of this event and thank each of you who are here to listen to me today. I am currently in the United States, but for the past 4 years, up until just a few months ago, I lived in one of my homelands, the Republic of Palau, or Palau. During this time, I deepened the passion I have for my people, the indigenous people of the islands, and expanded respect for my culture and a traditional way of life. I have also come to realize the urgency of climate action. So a little bit about Palau. Palau, or Palau, is in the western Pacific Ocean. It has 18,000 to 20,000 people and is made up of 340 islands. Some are small and some are large. The total land area is 466 kilometers squared, and the capital is Ngurulmud. Palau is well known for the Palau National Marine Sanctuary and also the Shark Sanctuary. It gained its independence in 1994. And as you can see, this is the Palau Flag. The blue, some people think, represents the sky, but it actually represents the ocean, and the yellow is the moon. And it's actually a full moon, which in Palauan culture represents a rebirth. So Palau actually has some of the richest biodiversity in the world, and definitely the greatest biodiversity in all of Micronesia. Palau has many different ecosystems, from marine, this is a picture of the Rock Islands, a marine ecosystem, to terrestrial and fresh water. This is a picture of Taki, which is one of the biggest waterfalls in Palau, and you have to hike all the way down there to get there. And so these unique ecosystems make up different habitats, which are home to Palau's 171 bird species, over 500 species of coral, over 300 species of sponges, and more than 1,300 species of reef fish. It's also home to 46 species of terrestrial reptiles and amphibians, 3 species of bats, and the mammals in Palau include dugongs, dolphins, and whales. 2 of my favorite species are right here. So on the left is the Palau megapode. So mega meaning big and pod meaning feet. So you can see it looks like a chicken with big feet. And then on the right is the hawksbill sea turtle. So I don't know about you, but I love sea turtles so much. And both of these amazing animals have so much to deal with in terms of people hunting them for food or to make jewelry, and other people stealing their eggs. Currently, both of these animals are actually on the critically endangered species list. On top of all of that, these animals have to deal with climate change. So for the Palau megapode, it's sensitive to rising sea levels. So they build their nests near the shorelines and the seashores. And so as sea levels rise, these nests will be vulnerable. For the hawksbill sea turtle, of course, everything about turtles has to do with the ocean. And so these animals' food sources are at risk. And in addition, with rising temperatures of sands, this will actually have a negative impact on this animal's access to, or this animal's ratio of males to females, because turtles have temperature-dependent sex determination. So meaning if the sand temperature is higher, there'll be more females born, and if it's lower, there'll be more males born. And so as you can imagine, with rising temperatures of sands, potentially there's a threat to the survival of this species. So let's talk more about climate impacts in Palau. So this photo is a picture of my daughter and her cousins at low tide in front of our house in Otae Ngararth. This is near the northern tip of Babeldaub. Palau's biggest island. It's possible that 10 years from now or 20 years from now, when she goes back to visit her homeland, she might not be able to play and run around with her cousins in that same spot. So yes, climate change has an impact on species, but it has an impact on people. And if we can't go back to where we traditionally play and fish and hunt, what will happen to our culture? So more specifically about the impacts on Palau, Palau's climate change outlook projections look like that sea level will rise from somewhere between 3 to 6.3 inches by 2030 and 11 to 25 inches by 2090. So this is in the lifetime of my daughter, that where she is standing might be 25 inches higher than it is right now during low tide. There will be an increased frequency and severity of extreme weather events. There will be changes in seasonal and annual rainfall, increased temperature, as we discussed before, and an increase in very hot days. In Palau right now, it's usually 86 and 100% humidity. I can't imagine it getting any hotter than that, but unfortunately, that's the outlook. And of course, increasing ocean acidification. In terms of impacts on natural systems, this will mean saltwater inundation, especially as we think of people's farms and gardens, storm surges, and a decrease in water quality. This means increased coral bleaching and increased coral death. It will mean a decline in fisheries and marine resources that are so critical to a Palauan way of life. It means that all those plants and animals that I talked about earlier are at risk of becoming extinct and possibly being replaced by invasive species like rats. In terms of impacts on people, this will mean less jobs because Palau is known for its beautiful marine environments. People come from all around the world to be tourists in Palau. If these marine species go away, I'm assuming the people won't come either. This will mean huge economic losses for families, reduced food security, human stress and mortality. You can imagine how hard it is for families when they lose their jobs. And we also expect that there'll be an increase in the incidence of waterborne and vector-borne diseases like dengue fever and other mosquito-borne illnesses. And then, of course, if there's no more jobs in Palau, people will leave Palau. We expect ex-migration. So unfortunately, climate change is something very real for the people of Palau. It's very real, and it's something that's in the future, but it's also something that we are experiencing right now. So it can be really depressing when you think about all of this, but I think the good news is there are things that we can do. So as I mentioned, I used to live in Palau. I was the executive director for Palau Conservation Society, which is a small nonprofit that works with communities to create solutions for conservation and for climate change. The goal of the organization is to build more resilient communities. There's PCS is an organization like this, and there are others. There are local people who know what to do. They just don't always have the resources to do it. So being in the United States, and thinking about the impacts of climate change, I was like, what can I do? What can I do to help my people? I'm not there. What can I do? I don't know about your parents, but I'm a very busy parent. I have a lot to do. I have another job. And I also ask myself the question, what can I do with the time that I have? And so this idea of the Palau Ocean Collective came to my mind. It's this idea that everyone, no matter how much time they have, can do something to make a positive difference to combat climate change. Everyone can take climate action. So the Palau Ocean Collective is a community of kids and adults who raise money for climate action in Palau. We raise money to send to organizations just like the one I just talked about. So we raise money, and it might be anywhere from $5 to $500, and we send it to people who already know the solutions that they need to implement in order to combat climate change. They just don't have the resources. Our goal for this year is relatively small. We want to raise $10,000 this year. And the way we thought about this is if we can just find 20 friends who can raise $500, for all you mathematicians out there, 20 times 500 is $10,000. So it's a small thing, but it can have a big impact. And so that's what I'm doing here in the United States. But I think we have to beg the question, what can you do? What can you do as a person in the Czech Republic who is interested in climate change, either at home or in another country like Palau? What can you do? And so I've come up with a list of 5 things that every person can do, whether you're a kid or you're an adult. And this list actually focuses on kids, because I think that's the bulk of the audience today. So the first thing you can do is reduce your carbon footprint. So some people might argue that doing small things are not really going to make a difference. But I think when it comes to climate change, we have to do what we can where we are. And so some things that my kids and my family are doing is we're trying to eat less meat. We're trying to walk more and bike more instead of always driving. And while these might not make a huge difference, we imagine that if 1,000 people do it, or if 10,000 people do it, or if 1,000,000 people do it, it can make a difference. So that's one thing we're doing. Secondly, I think that every kid or every adult can continue to learn about climate change in school and at home. One cool thing about being a student growing up these days is that you're learning about climate change in school, just like kids in Palau are learning about climate change. When I was in school, climate change wasn't taught. Some people knew about it, but most people didn't. And so you have the advantage of learning about it now and then thinking about solutions that you can implement to make a difference. Once you start your learning or continue your learning about climate change, the third thing you can do is tell people. Tell your parents, tell your friends, tell people what you learned and how they can make a difference. In Palau, we had a situation a lot of years ago where people were eating turtles. They were catching turtles and eating them. And so we said, hey kids, this is a problem. Oh my gosh. Oh, and speaking of children, I have a child right here. Okay, so speaking of kids, every kid can make a difference. Are you going to make a difference for climate change?
Yeah.
Okay. The fourth thing that you can do is volunteer or raise money for climate action. Not everyone has the time to go out and plant trees and do things to combat climate change.
That's me.
Honey, let's share with the kids, okay? We're talking to them. But you can volunteer and raise money at local organizations or raise money for organizations around the world. I think the final thing that I would suggest that kids can do to make a difference and to take climate action is just to remember that we are connected. What you do in your home impacts people all around the world. And so, every time we drive our cars, every time that we, throw something on the ground, that has the potential of impacting people around the world. And so I just challenge people to remember that we are all citizens of this earth. We are all connected by our oceans. And that we all need to work together if we want to make a difference for climate change. Thank you so much for your time. Can you say thank you, Shade?
Thank you.
And where are you from? Are you a Palauan girl?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Pojďme si ještě společně říct, jaká jsou ta konkrétní klimatická opatření, co mohou anebo co by měli dělat lidé na Palau.
There are a number of concrete actions that organizations and individuals are taking in Palau. And some, I think that we don't know those solutions yet. And so, we continue to encourage people to think and to research, how do we solve this problem? The first priority for Palau right now, from my perspective, is creating more resilient communities. So what does that mean? Basically, we are already experiencing climate impacts. We know that in the last few years, we have had more typhoons than we've had in years. We just had one a couple of months ago that cost millions of dollars in damage. And so one concrete thing that we have got to do that costs lots of money is to improve the physical infrastructure of Palau. We need people to build homes higher, away from shorelines. We need our kind of community organizations, our hospitals, our high schools. They are all in low-lying areas, and those are institutions that the entire community needs. The hospital has an oceanfront view. You can imagine the impacts of when a typhoon happens and if people are hurt, and the hospital is vulnerable, So I think addressing our community resilience by shoring up our physical infrastructure. In terms of other areas that our focus areas, as I mentioned before, we are highly dependent on marine resources for our livelihoods and for our food. And so we really need to focus on sustainable fisheries. Right now, people are over harvesting fish and other sea creatures. They're poaching species that they shouldn't be poaching. For example, we have a species that is very famous, the Napoleon wrasse. It's a huge, beautiful fish. And it is not legal to eat or to take those fish, but unfortunately people continue to do it because you can get such a high price for it. We need better regulations and better enforcement of the laws around fisheries, and we need more people to adhere to those laws, not for the short term, you might get to eat a delicious fish, but for the long term, that those fish are very important to our culture and our future food sustainability. And then finally, in terms of policies, we do need to look at our climate change policy and really implement it. We have a very long document called our climate change policy with all of these amazing ideas, but we need the resources and the people to implement those policies. And so that is also a priority for the country. Thank you.